Hey everybody, Mark with Rams Up back here at once again with Paul and Tom. And like we do every year, like we did last year, we're going to take a look at the Rams draft. It's been over a week since the draft ended, but things have had our thoughts in the draft have had some time to ferment perhaps. And we'll get into it here in a second. How have you been, Tom? What are you up to?
Oh, doing great. Just enjoying this very different Rams offseason from the ones that we've had in the last sort of 5 years. And so, but it's exciting. I'm really pleased with their direction, and it's just a kind of a breath of fresh air after the terrible year last year. So, just enjoying the offseason with the Rams.
Yeah, I think I've actually seen this comment several times. This could be finally an interesting preseason where the games might actually mean something as far as player evaluation, especially. What's going on with you, Paul?
Everything is fantastic. Weather's great out here in the East Coast. I'm looking forward to summer vacation. And also, like you said, it's going to be a very interesting off season for the Rams. So every morning I log in and I have my fingers crossed that there can be some positive news for the Rams. So I'm excited to talk draft.
Yeah, I think we may see some things happening after June 1st for sure. So let's start with your overall thoughts on the draft. I'll go first. I'll try to lay some groundwork here for you guys to bounce off of. Um, you know, I think, 20 mock drafts, and just gives you an idea of, I think the only purpose of mock drafts is you can learn a lot about the players. But if you're really taking yourself seriously, that you think you're going to be thinking along with Les Snead, good luck with that. I think there are two guys, they drafted 14 players, and there were only two players that popped up in any of my mock drafts. That's Kobe Turner and Stetson Bennett. I drafted them a couple of times, not necessarily in those slots, but everybody else, a lot of these guys were not on my radar at all. So I'm just trusting in Les. He's had a couple of mediocre drafts, but I'm hoping he hits on some of these. I think since Brad Holmes left, they may have lost some corporate knowledge on how to evaluate players, perhaps. I don't know, but I'm hoping they turn the corner. And I will say, shout out to Paul. You had said you wanted them to draft three edge rushers, and that's exactly what they did. Uh, Now, my call on drafting a bunch of cornerbacks did not come to fruition, but that we'll get into that, I'm sure, moving forward here. What about you, Tom? Overall, your initial thoughts on this draft?
Yeah, so I love the draft in general. I like the types of players that they took. I like especially the attitudes of the players, or that based upon what they've talked about in their backgrounds. They I think they drafted hungry players, and so that's I think a really important trait, increasingly important trait these days. That does lead to, as you know, we'll dive into a little bit more. It does, when you kind of like a player in particular, sometimes you reach for them, or draft them earlier than maybe that they're slotted to go. But I think from a positional value standpoint, they did a great job, and really stuck to that early on in the draft, and then started to diversify, which they obviously needed to do into other positions. But overall, I like the draft a lot. Have a few complaints with, as usual, with some of their early draft picks, but again, something we'll get into.
Now, Paul, I have a feeling you're going to not totally agree with that, with the direction the Rams went in this draft, based on some text messages we shared.
So I think it was the tale of two drafts. I think if you look at the Rams draft from rounds 5 down, they crushed it. From
Right.
rounds 5 on, absolutely. The value they extracted from rounds 5, 6, and 7, I thought was exceptional. I think Tom sort of hit on it. I think when you look at what they did from rounds 2 to 4, they played a very safe draft. They played it close to the vest, to some degree. They definitely need to see a chiropractor from all the reaching. But other than that, I think it was from what they wanted to accomplish. We walked away with 14 draft picks. They had some very safe picks, a lot of low risk, high reward picks. I think that's what they were basically aiming for. They did. I thought you could definitely see that trend. Older players that had a very high character grades. That was consistent in the early rounds. In their first, I would say, two or three picks, you definitely saw that trend. But yeah, I think round 4 was where the departure sort of happened. We saw that with the Stetson Bennett, and I'm surprised you said about Kobe Turner, because I also had him in a mock, but much lower. So we'll talk about that. But I thought overall it was a safe draft. It was a Rams draft the way they wanted to sort of conduct it. I would have liked to see them take some more chances earlier on in the draft and go for some more dynamic players. There were some very dynamic players on the board when they went with some of their picks in the 3rd round, but we'll definitely talk about that. But overall, I would give them a solid B+.
Yeah, taking off on your comment, Tom, about hungry players, high character players. I have a friend who is a big Clemson fan, and he sent me some comments from the coach there about Davis Allen. And you'd think he was nominating him for sainthood. The guy is probably his favorite player ever, it sounds like. So I think we got a good one in Davis Allen. Let's see. I'll let you go first, Paul. What was your biggest surprise of this draft, player-wise or strategy-wise?
So the biggest surprise, I would say, for this draft for me, I would say was Kobe Turner from Wake Forest. Not that I don't like him. I'll say this because there were a lot of people, my buddies texting me, who is this kid? And looking him up on ESPN and everything. He had really high grades for his run defense. He's not just a gap penetrator, but his highest grades came on run defense, which I thought was really interesting. Great NFL body. You see him. He looks like a football player. I'm just, and I hate saying this because in the draft, it's always, you can't really predict when a player is going to be available. I think they could have got him later in the draft. I want to just read off who was available when they picked Kobe Turner. Mark, don't laugh. Guess who was available? Darnell Washington from Georgia was available.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He sunk a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, he wound up. And guess where he wound up? Look, what does Mark always say? This team is going to take him and turn him any player and turn them into all pros. Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
Coach Tomlin, was had him circled right there on the board.
Right.
Ricky Stromberg from Arkansas was also available. Kelly Ringo, Tom, your boy, was available. Isaiah McGuire, the edge rusher from Missouri, was available. Clark Phillips, the corner from Utah, great playmaker, he was available. So obviously they liked this player. Kobe Turner had tremendously high grades for character, leadership, run defense, blue collar, good ability to penetrate the gaps. But to me, I thought that was a surprise, and I thought Stetson Bennett was a surprise. I thought he would also have been. I had him slated more for like round 5. Thought that was sort of a surprise too. But it's hard to say when you like your players, it's better to go get them than take a chance. But that's
Turner. Yeah, Turner. I'm a little confused on that pick because I don't know if they can play him next to Aaron Donald. Maybe they can, but that seems like a pretty lightweight defensive line. Two really good players, perhaps, but still. How about you, Tom? What was the biggest surprise for you?
Well, my initial big surprise was just because of my predisposition for believing not only my own thoughts, but belief that they would take, at least 3 corners. And I said even potentially even 4, that they only took 1 cornerback and waited till round, till pick 182 to do it. They got a good one in THT, Trey Tomlinson. Anyway, so that was my biggest surprise. But just going back to these, since we're on the topic, I think we all agree that the first pick was a solid pick, right? Navilla, and he's going to step in and start, and that's a big need. So great pick there. But the next 2 picks, I'm not, again, I'm probably my least 2 favorite picks of the draft. I would, potentially respectfully disagree, Paul, that they were safe picks. I don't think they're safe picks. I think they have very low, they have high ceilings, but they also have low floors, in my opinion. These are two very undersized guys, no real pedigree, very limited film. Both of them were literally not recruited out of high school for different reasons, but and so just kind of late bloomers, and the biggest issue there is is their size. I mean, just they're both 6'2", and on the edge, and especially at the defensive line, as you were talking about with Turner. So that was my biggest surprise. I thought we were headed for a train wreck. The Stetson Bennett pick was, questionable, but I understand it's a backup quarterback that they can develop. Some upside there, and then after that, they started crushing it. From Nick Hampton on, they crushed the draft. So in full agreement with you there, Paul.
Kobe Turner wasn't even invited to the combine.
Right.
So that, talk about out of nowhere, right? But
yeah,
it's interesting. Like I said, I think that when we talk about the safety scenario, it was more about, I think, you could see the role that those two players are going to be sort of slotted in. And it's almost like, no matter what, they're going to sort of fit into that slot. Whether or not they're going to excel, totally different story. But, you see Byron Young. So Byron Young's an older player. He's 25. He had a great story, was working, I think, in a convenience store. It was a great story. And you were like, they are going to eat this up. This is going to work out great in the draft. He blew up the combine, just absolutely blew up the combine. And that is the recipe in the NFL. They love that when they have these designated edge rushers. Well, once again, and I agree with you. Like, that's what I said. Like, I really think when you're picking in the third round, they had two really, really nice slots in round 3 that they could have walked away with some really dynamic players. I think they're going to regret on the players they passed for Kobe Turner 100%. I also think there was such a drop off in round 2 to round 3 in the talent level, and you could see that teams were backing away. And it wasn't just the Rams. There were a lot of teams that had a lot of reach picks in rounds 3 and 4, if you noticed, right? That trend. I thought that Kobe Turner slot would have been perfect to trade back and get some more round 4, round 5 picks. I thought for sure they were going to deal out of that second, third round pick and move back a little. I think they definitely could have walked away either with a later third, early fourth, maybe 2 fourths, maybe a fourth to fifth. I don't know. But I thought that was the perfect opportunity to trade back.
Yeah, my biggest surprise was the same as Tom's, just a lack of focus on cornerbacks. And it leads me to believe they either like Robert Rochelle and a couple of those other guys more than we realize. It possibly could mean that they know there are going to be some undrafted rookie cornerbacks that they really like and they can bring in. Combination of those two facts, but I'm also concerned about the size of our cornerbacks. We don't have a lot of size back there, and in this division, and I think Tomlinson is going to be a good one, but he just adds to that concern of we don't have any Tremaine Johnsons on this roster, going up against Deebo Samuel and DK Metcalf and some of these guys. But hey, trust in less, I guess. Once again. Okay, well,
traumatized me by mentioning Robert Rochelle. I need time to recuperate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just to put a kind of cap off the conversation about those early draft picks, I kind of had Nick Hampton and Byron Young kind of in that same range, in that mid-teens range in terms of edges, and they got Nick Hampton at 161 and took Byron Young at 77. So I feel like those guys were both that third, that fourth round, that in that range. And I just feel like they could have easily traded back off of both of those picks and just, probably ended up with 17, 18 guys that were all about the same.
Now, what did we like? Let me go first. It'll be real quick because it goes back to these edge rushers, kind of what you're getting at, Tom, maybe a little bit. And someone wrote on one of the websites, they gave the Rams kudos, actually, for what they called their carpet bombing approach to the edge rusher problem they have. And maybe that's true. I mean, they drafted 3. Now, I think Deshaun Johnson, I've seen him listed as defensive end and edge. So maybe 3.5 edge rushers. I think the other 3 are definitely edge: Mathis, Young, and Hampton. And that's not a bad approach. I mean, as you move deeper into the draft, 35-40% chance of hitting. And so I'm thinking they're hoping one of these guys really pans out and turns into a really good edge rusher. So I kind of like that approach. Add picks, 14 picks. It just increases your chances of adding impact players. How about you, Tom? How do you?
Yeah,
is there something?
No, I agree. No, I love the volume approach, especially in this draft. After the first half of the first round, maybe you could call it up till the end of the mid end of the first round. After that, it just fell off, like Paul mentioned, very, very quickly. And so volume was a great idea. I mean, the Rams got 14 draft picks, one shy of the all-time record of 15 draft picks. So yeah, volume was great. I liked how they spread it around. I mean, just to touch on this, they do have some issues at a couple of their positions. And so I think you were going to get into that with a different question later on, but where do we still have holes? But, clearly, in my opinion, cornerback's one of those. Yeah, I like the approach in general. Don't like a couple of the early picks. Love the later picks. And but there was no way we were going to fill every hole with this draft. No way.
How about you, Paul?
Yeah, so when you do your spring cleaning, or just like Tom said, you have way too many holes that you can fill via the draft. So you got to do your BPA work, and I think they did. And like I said, I think when you look at their tale of two drafts, look at the Rams draft from round 5 on, and it's A+, it's A++. So let's take a look. Let's start with Georgia Dog McClendon, like our last segment. This was the tackle I said out of Georgia. I love this kid. And he could play anywhere on the line except, guard. He could probably play guard, tackle. Fantastic. Davis Allen, his size, and, you got to go back and double check the size, right? Because the college rosters, they always round up by 1.5 inches. He's legit 6'6", right? His combine numbers were actually legit. He was 6'6", 238. Go back and watch his tape. Fantastic at contested catches. Yeah. Very smooth. Looks like, a legit pass-catching tight end.
And a great blocker.
Yeah. And he was physical. The only thing was, and obviously that comes with coaching, the technique part of it and everything else. Didn't break as many tackles as I thought for his size, but a lot of potential. Now, let's just stop and think. Let's take Tyler Higbee out of the mix. Bryson Hopkins and this kid. You could have a lot of fun with letting these two kids play. Think about that for a second. There's a lot of fun there, a lot of young players, and you got your Hunter Long as insurance. So I like this pick. I really would have liked Darnell Washington, but that's besides the point. I won't let that go, right? My boy Puka Nacua, to me, very reminiscent of Bobby Trees. I love that's who he reminds me of. He reminds me of, he has a lot of Robert Woods in him, right? I like that pick. I thought it was a great value pick. Hampton linebacker from Appalachian State. Oh, love this kid. He's like lightning in a bottle. They call him undersized, 6'2", 235, but he can rush the passer. And that Appalachian State defense, they run a 3-4. He plays the weak side dog position, which means he comes on every play. So he's got designated pass rusher written all over him. And sneaky feeling, because the kid's tough, he might even get some looks right next to Ernest Jones, in some of these like blitz schemes. So it might be interesting.
Yeah. Because that is a position that they really didn't address as much as I thought as the linebacker spot.
Yeah.
But I think they found some guys in the some undrafted free agents we'll talk about later. And I'll take off on one of the things you mentioned before we go to Tom here. Another thing I really liked is the versatility of some of these offensive linemen. They got guys they can plug in almost anywhere. Avila, McClendon, Coleman Shelton, guys that can really move around. AJ Jackson, so they get a lot of flexibility if anything close to what happened last year happens again. Certainly,
and a healthy Logan Bruss, right?
Yeah. What if Logan Bruss turns out to be pretty good and Avila is as good as advertised? suddenly we have a pretty darn good offensive line. What about you, Tom? What did you especially like about this draft?
Yeah, well, I love it. I think we've said it already, but I love the picks from Nick Hampton on. I think they just crushed it. I mean, by far the best. I mean, they had the most picks by far, so it's easy to say. But I think virtually every one of those picks, until you get to maybe the last couple of picks, or could have been anybody, but just love those 6-7 picks that we talked about, those 5th and 6th round guys. But one thing that I'm sure talked about a lot, maybe somebody's mentioned it, is the connection between Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So have you guys heard this story?
I do not think so.
Yeah. So Puka Nacua, obviously out of BYU, but he initially went to Washington, right? And he went there because of his relationship with Junior Adams, the wide receiver coach, who was Cooper Kupp's coach at Eastern Washington. So there's a connection there with Cooper Kupp, which is never a bad thing. So whether it's Bobby Trees or Cooper Kupp, we'll see who he ends up looking like. But I love some of these later picks, and we talked about Tomlinson and Zach Evans. I love that was I think a really good late round pick. He's a very strong running back. Kind of had 3rd and 4th round grades. Really just fell for some reason. Even Jason Taylor had 4th and 5th round grades and fell. So that was a great, and just down the line, just great picks late in the game.
And Tomlinson is LT's nephew, by the way, LT 21.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
And that's why he went to TCU. He was going to go to I forgot where he was going to go. He's going to go somewhere else, and LT begged him to go to TCU.
And I got to tell you, I love this kid's competitiveness. When he fell to round 6, I could not believe it. And it was largely because of his size. If you look at his size numbers, he came in a lot smaller than I anticipated. I was like, holy cow, when I looked at his combine numbers. Watch his film. This kid is an ultra competitor. How can you be LT's nephew and not be a competitor? But the kid produces. He has great technique and that TCU run, that was a great run. Think about it. They were the national championship game, and he was a pivotal part of that defense. He played lights out. So I think he's also a great value pick around 6. So it just gets better and better when you look at those round 5, round 6.
So, Tom, is there anything that you especially hated about this draft? I think you already gave it away, probably just the top end, or is there a specific player that you didn't like?
No, I liked everything they did. I'm okay with the Stetson Bennett draft. I posted, it's too long of a quote to read, but Mike Giannitti, the head guy at Spot Track, on his podcast, he said, you guys aren't, I'll paraphrase. He said, my favorite quarterback pick in the draft, and I know my audience, I know you guys aren't going to like this, but it was Stetson Bennett. Give him 2 years, give him a year or two on the bench to get familiar with that playbook behind Matthew Stafford, and something pretty interesting may come of that. So I love the Spot Track guys and the Over the Cap guys. Given my predisposition, but to the cap and the roster building and stuff. But that was his pick. So I kind of agree with that. After that, it was just lights out. But those second and third picks, not big fans of it. But again, they have low floors and high ceilings. If these guys come out, especially Byron Young, lights out and tears it up, then these guys are geniuses. But unfortunately, I think there's a bigger chance, unfortunately, that these guys are not gonna contribute like everybody hopes.
About you, Paul, what was the thing you disliked the most about this draft?
I don't like the bang value that they got out of round 3. I think it was, like I said, I think they went for, all right, when you look at X, Y, and Z. So, I think, so great example would be, we talked about Kobe Turner. I do think he would have been available later, but for whatever reason, they might have more information about teams that may like him, whatever. He did grade out, like I said, very well, but he wasn't invited to the combine. So I find it hard to believe that there were teams fighting over him in the third round, But Byron Young, I could understand, but there were other edge rushers available. They took him, and I got to say it, my favorite, we talked about it last segment, Ojulari was available.
Right.
They took him, right? I'm sure Tom agrees. They took him over Ojulari, and they took him over Hall from Auburn, who also graded out very high on leadership, very high on character from that Auburn defense. Wasn't fully developed as a pass rusher, but neither was Young.
Ended up with the Seahawks.
Young carried a grade of round 4, round 5 going into the combine. When he blew it up, he went right up to like round 2, right? The classic combine player that we see in the NFL all the time. But when you talk about edge, and we talked about it last time, was that speed element in the NFL to them translates to success at the edge, and that's what they did. But I still say at round 2 and 3, you want accomplished, established players. I will say this about Avila, that I was surprised he was available at 36. I really was, because he was the number 1 rated interior lineman on everybody's boards. Great player. Everybody knows the talk about no sacks and 115 reps, the TCU run. I think what sold the Rams on him, and I think the only thing I see on his tape that, obviously is his size in a zone scheme. He's going to have to get down to like 325, 320, right? Just for that quickness and everything else to play in that zone scheme. But the one thing I will say, and he does have those T-Rex arms at times, right? He plays with the elbows close to the body instead of locking out. But his interviews, just like last year when I talked about Salier, this kid had great interviews. And one interview in particular stands out for me, and I think that's why the Rams they were like, he's perfect for our locker room. They asked him some questions about the success at TCU and his future, and all he did was talk about his teammates. He spent the entire interview talking about his teammates.
Yeah, I heard a story about the coach at TCU. When he took the job, he wasn't sure what he was getting into. I forget the coach's name. And they walked him out to the practice field, and he wasn't sure how good this team was, what he was getting into. And the offensive line was running through some drills, and Avila was out there, and his eyes were drawn to that offensive line and their workout. And it took him 10 seconds watching them, and he said, "Oh, we could actually be pretty good."
Right.
And it was, a lot of that was due to Avila. So that's a pretty interesting story. I wanted to talk about some of these players specifically, and I don't think we need to talk about all of them. We've talked enough about them, I think. But let's see. What about the running back, Zach Evans? He was a surprise to me. Hadn't been on my radar at all, but then you read about him. Sounded like his career in college got derailed for a number of reasons, but he's a guy that could be a home run. I mean, a high ceiling, high ceiling, low floor type of guy, definitely, I guess. And I think he's very similar to Cam Akers in a lot of ways. Did you guys? Assuming you all like the late pick, so you must love this pick as well.
Yeah, he was a very highly touted player coming out of high school. Like he was the highest rated player out of Texas, I think, or number 3 overall, the first running back out of Texas. He was the second rated running back, I believe, behind Bijan Robinson in the country, if I'm not mistaken. But just extremely highly touted coming out of high school, and just he got into college, and just it feels like he's kind of like a freelancer. He's not very fundamentally sound. He probably got away with it in high school just out of pure talent, and didn't continue to improve on the fundamentals. So that's the knock on him, but his talent is there for sure. He also had some injury problems, both in the musculature and in the skeletal, as well as in with some concussion stuff. So there's a lot of reasons that he fell. I mean, it kind of all added up, but we got a really high ceiling guy there. I'll tell you that. That was a great pick.
And you have any opinion on Zach Evans, Paul?
Yeah, sure. So I was thinking more about, so the Rams, when you look at what they have, they spent a high pick on Kyron Williams, right? We got Cam Akers. And, Mark and I always talk about this. We need a back that's going to move the chain. So I was thinking they were going to go for that kind of back, right? We had talked about that before.
Right.
They went in a different direction, right? And Zach Evans was a TCU transfer, right? It's like, like you had mentioned. He is not a big back, but he's a fast back. But when you watch his film, he shows a lot of toughness, breaks tackles, runs downhill when he needs to. Had some injury concerns. He might contribute as a kick returner early on until he works his way into the mix. So that might be, he definitely has that home run hitting capability. The one knock on him, they did say he's a big fumbler. He has his ratio of attempts to fumbles is exceptionally high. So the other way, fumbles to attempts is exceptionally high. So that's just something to keep in mind. But like I said, he's got a lot of talent. Definitely has the tools to succeed. Needs to put on a little bit of weight. He looks to me a lot like a lot of the criticisms about him were the same that they had for Jahmyr Gibbs. Is he big enough? Can he carry the load? That type of thing. And also, he wasn't able to be the main guy on 2 college teams. So that always is a question mark in a lot of scouts' minds. However, in round 6, can you complain about getting a home run hitter like this?
Right.
So that's the way you have to look at it.
Talking about a move the chains type of guy, we may have found one, the undrafted rookie Tyon Evans
From Louisville.
out of Louisville. Now, I don't know if he'll make the team, but he's that type of guy, I think. Well, we'll talk about the undrafted rookies a little bit later. How much do you guys know about, hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, Ochuan Mathis? He was another guy that I was really completely unaware of him, to be honest.
So the Nebraska linebacker, he is, once again, sort of playing it close to the vest. He is a great length, 6'5", 250, long arms, does really well at locking out the edge. Reminds you a little bit of, when you look at that 3-4 Staley defense, right? Very important, right? Strong side linebacker has to spill everything back to the middle. So I think the attractiveness there is more about how he plays the run. He's got good potential for the pass rush. Numbers weren't off the charts, but is a good developmental player. However, can play the run well, has the physical attributes to play the run well on the strong side. The mindset might be, Hoyt, is he going to be on the strong side or the backside? If you put him on the backside, you can maximize his pass rush ability because of his size if you play him on the strong side. But can he handle playing the run as well as the pass down after down without losing that pass rush sizzle? So might be a rotational piece, but that's the way I look at him. That's what I see.
Yeah, he was a little bit of one of the few, I believe, reaches in that in those later rounds. They must have really liked this guy. Most boards kind of didn't have him being drafted, just kind of a priority free agent, I think. So yeah, I mean, he's I think Paul said, he's really just physically sound, but he's just really underdeveloped in his application on the edge, and so we'll see. He just has great raw talent and just a lot of upside. So they must have just liked that. There's obviously a theme here in the Rams draft. It's high ceiling guys that are high character, older, ready to go, if you will, from a age perspective, but high ceilings because of some gap, either undersized or underdeveloped, and they were willing to reach on a lot of those guys. And so if they hit, it's going to be great, and if they don't, it's going to be a disaster.
I wanted to talk about this punter, and we had talked about special teams, drafting special teams before the draft. And I think we all kind of agreed that, at least I think we agreed that they might draft one special teamer, a kicker, or a punter, and they would have the pick of the litter, so to speak, of free agent long snappers and such. And that's kind of what happened. And what I really like is they found a punter in the draft that can just boom it. And then they signed an undrafted rookie who is extremely accurate, but not a big leg. And then they got the best long snapper out there, I think. But the combination of the kicker punter, the punter they drafted, the kicker was the free agent. I really liked how they solved that problem. I'm feeling a lot better about their special teams. It's still going to be we'll still all be a little nervous come game time, 3 rookies. But I think drafting a punter with a big leg was a smart move in the 6th round, was it, I believe? Do you agree,
Yeah.
Tom? I know Tom, I know you were probably the least of the 3 of us, the least thrilled with the prospect of drafting a special teamer.
Again, at the end of the draft, why not, right? They need all these positions. Probably not a long snapper. I would have thought they would have gone with a kicker, but they got a good kicker as a UDFA and Dunn. And with Evans, they did. I think they did a good job there too. And they really liked the guy. He's out of a smaller school. He wasn't one of the top guys on the board at the time, but they just love his booming leg and feel like they can work with him on directionality and release time and other things that he sort of needs to work on. But so yeah, it's fine. With 14 picks, taking one special teamer that you really like, they just really picked him because they didn't want somebody else to get him as a UDFA. That's really what they did.
Yeah.
So
and now I know that Wingate University exists, and I actually know sort of kind of where it's at too.
That's right.
How about you, Paul? Were you okay with the Ethan Evans pick?
Well, first thing, as you can tell by the gray in my beard, I'm very old. So we live by the old rule: you never draft kickers. You never draft kickers. You get them as UDFAs or you sign them as low-cost vets. But having said that, so Ethan Evans definitely was considered the best punter in the draft. High marks, his hang time, they love it. He can boom it, no question about it. Did have some experience on kickoffs too. Very important in the NFL now, having punters that can do it. His only criticism that said he has to work on was the directional kicking, which is huge for the Rams. That's their thing with their punters. And secondly is how quickly he can get the kicks off. Right, Wingate very different in terms of the competition level. So that's like the hardest transition really for punters is how quickly can they get the punt off and still get that degree of hang time as well as distance. So yeah.
So that said, you're not a big fan of the Jake Moody pick either, then.
I mean, other than Ray Guy, who can we talk about where really kickers that are getting drafted pan out? But listen, to each team, each to their own. Everybody has their own strategy. The Rams, as you both alluded to last time, like you said, might be, prepping for next year. So they're building the roster from the bottom up, really. So worst case scenario, they have a strong bottom half of the roster. That's the way you really have.
The 49ers situation, it seems like they've got a pretty darn solid roster, except for maybe kicker. What about quarterback? Maybe they're the team that should have drafted Stetson Bennett. But
for me, kickers, particularly when you talk about special teams, listen, it's called the third phase for a reason. Teams that pay attention to special teams, they do well. Teams that overlook special teams and really give it lip service, they pay the price during the season. And when you talk about place kickers, it's a hard reality and it's hard to digest. Place kickers translate directly into wins. They're the ones that are on the field with 1 second left on the clock. Whether they make it or not translates directly into a win. So this Matt Gay scenario and how they're going to resolve it is going to probably translate to at least 2 wins or losses in the season.
Right.
If not
who else have we not talked about? What about Jason Taylor? Thoughts on Jason Taylor, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I had mentioned him before. I think he's he was a really good, a really good late pick as a safety. I mean, I sort of had him kind of in that 4th, 5th round range. So I think that was one of their then great pick at 234, I think, or something like that. And so yeah, just super excited. I think he has a chance to. That's one of the areas that they, obviously their whole entire secondary is in need of players, but he'll and plus he's going to be a great special teams player. Like he fits that mold that they like. So he'll definitely be a solid special teams player, probably a standout special teams player for us. Having lost so many of those guys that we lost in the, with the purge, the big purge. And so, yeah, anyway, looking forward to seeing him. I think he's a bigger guy than some of our other guys at that position, say Russ Yeast and things like that. So, I think he has a chance to do well there.
So Jason Taylor, I think he slots really nicely behind Fuller. He's got the size to come down into the box. Has some good coverage ability. 6 interceptions last year, surprising, right? 6 INTs, so he's productive, and we know the theme that Les Snead and Coach McVay have been talking about since last year. They want that production on defense. So I think he slots really nicely behind Fuller because that the critique on him has to improve his tackling, but coming out of college, that's like 90% of all college D-backs. They have to improve their tackling. Play recognition was another questionable attribute, but got high marks, hard worker, great work ethic, works well with the coaches, team leader, positive influence in the locker room. So when you take a look at it, and also I agree with Tom. I thought when I look at him, I think he's going to contribute right away on special teams. So I think it was a solid pick for that late in the draft.
Yeah, great pick.
Oh, Mark, you're on mute.
Thank you. I think we've talked about every player except Deshaun Johnson, Mr. Irrelevant. Any thoughts on him? He was another guy that was not on my radar, and a guy that gets drafted as Mr. Irrelevant. That probably happens with a lot of mock drafts. He probably wasn't showing up. Any thoughts on him, Paul? You seem to be the guy that does a little bit of a deep dive on some of these players. What do you know about Deshaun Johnson? I think I'm pronouncing that right.
Well, I did not even have him as a draftable player. I had him as a UDFA. However, and you notice all the linemen that they took fall around that same range, right? 6'2", 290, 6'2", 285, with that Aaron Donald effect, so to speak.
Right.
They want those penetrators, those short, low to the ground guys. So he's described as a penetrator. He had good production. And if you look at his TFL and sack numbers, good penetration capability, quick off the ball. The ability to defend the run is the question. But if you look at what he was drafted for, he might be that, time to give Aaron Donald a breather type scenario. So, we'll see how it plays itself out. But once again, late in the draft to get a player like that, once again, he's described no red flags when it comes to character or anything like that. Fits in perfectly for a 7th round pick.
Any thoughts on him, Tom, or any other player that you wanted to add anything about?
Yeah, I mean, just Johnson again. He's yet another undersized defensive lineman. So I think they think everybody is Darren Donald or even Kalijah Kinsey. So I'm not sure, but I mean, it's just like so. But maybe they think it's the future. I don't know. I mean, clearly, I was going to mention this earlier, but if the Rams, the way they're going so undersized, and if that, maybe that's their next innovation, and they were doing the trade high picks for players, and then the rest of the league started doing it. I weren't the first ones to do it, but they sort of did it en masse. And then we saw what happened last year, and then they couldn't trade high picks for superstar talent anymore because everybody else was doing it. So it caught up with them. Maybe this is the next innovation. I mean, that's one thing that struck me, and is undersized defensive linemen. If these guys develop and with some skills, and obviously who better to teach them than Aaron Donald, then it could be something tremendous. But he falls into the same mold without the physical freakiness of say Kobe Turner.
Tom and I are going to wear Ashawn Robinson jerseys for the rest of the season.
Yeah, we want our 330-pounder back.
We need the run stopper. We need that one run stopper on the whole team, right?
Yeah. So
yeah, and maybe Bobby Brown's that guy. I don't know. Maybe there's someone they have in mind for that. There were some really big D tackles available too throughout the draft, and I mocked a few of them because I thought the same thing. Just throw in a big beast in the middle there.
But situational, think of value, right? The draft value. That when you look at where Greg Gaines went and where Ashawn went in free agency, you can see that those guys are not highly valued unless they're freaky athletic. So they didn't draft any of those guys just because they can be bought on the free agent market really cheap. And so, that's another reason that if a guy is small and better and athletic and can play on the defensive line and in the interior defensive line, then that guy's going to be worth a lot of money. So, that's why I think they didn't draft a big beefy guy.
Yeah, I had originally told you guys to identify 3 undrafted free agents that'll make this team. That's probably a bad way of putting it because all of these guys could make this roster. There are so many openings. So I'm going to give you 3 guys that I think are going to most likely be impact players, not only make the roster, but actually contribute on a regular basis. And I'll throw 3 names out there for you. One is linebacker DeAndre Square out of Kentucky. And it's primarily because there's some, I think there's opportunities there at linebacker. We still have some holes there after Ernest Jones, I think. I'm not going to give you any cornerbacks because there's obviously going to be some undrafted free agent cornerbacks that make this roster and contribute. I'm just not sure which one. I identified Florida A&M wide receiver Xavier Smith as a guy that could make the team as a specialist, punt returner, kick returner. But on this team, I think they have guys that could probably fill that void. But if they wanted to identify someone that could really impact games, Xavier Smith might be the guy. And the third guy I identified is the safety out of Memphis, Quindell Johnson. He's a guy that my research indicates he was draftable. It was expected to go as early as the 5th round. And I think there's opportunities in that safety group as well. We could add another safety out of this group of undrafted free agents. So those are my 3: Quindell Johnson, Xavier Smith, DeAndre Square. Pretty tough job trying to pick names out of this group. But that's what I came up with. How about you, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, right, for the audience, is that we're talking about non-special team guys, right? Because we both obviously think that Alex Ward and Christopher Dunn will make it, which
right
was part of the yeah. So we're talking about
thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, 3 position players. So I agree with your Quindell Johnson. I think that's probably my number one. I think that it's because they're so thin at safety, and we have Jordan Fuller, Russ Yeast, Quentin Lake, Jason Taylor drafted, and that's it. And usually the safeties are guys that are going to contribute on special teams. And then, we have some injury issues here with Fuller and Lake. And so, and Russ Yeast is I really like him as a player, but he's a little undersized. And so I think that Quindell Johnson is my number one. I'll say lock. I'll say it. He's a lock.
Okay.
Okay. I had to, yeah, you have to come out a little bit strong in these podcasts. And then my other 2 guys are, believe it or not, another safety was for all the same reasons that I just said. Rashad Torrance, I think another guy that you had mentioned with Johnson was draftable, and for all the same reasons will do well. And then the other guy I think we had touched on was, maybe we didn't. We touched on obviously Zach Evans at the running back, but the other Evans, Keon Evans, I think is also somebody that has a chance to make the roster at the running back position, just given the the injury history to Cam Akers and Kyron Williams. And but I don't know if he'll make the 53, but he'll be on that UDFA squad, or I'm sorry, on the practice squad, and I believe we'll get some call-ups, and they'll give him some looks.
Okay, Paul, who you got?
All right, so my three will start off with I also had Tyon Evans. Just like his build, he runs hard, definitely looks like a churner, can get those first downs for you as a running back. Definitely coachable, needs a lot of coaching, but definitely coachable. I think he holds a lot of promise for that sort of niche role that the Rams are looking for at running back. So I have him at the 1. I did text Tom when we were looking at UDFAs, and I had also Rashad Torrance. Rashad Torrance, I think, is going to make the squad. I like what he did at Florida. He's got the explosiveness. He's got the instincts. I think he'll make the squad. I think he has the opportunity. I think he will definitely fit for what the Rams are looking for. He's a playmaker, and I think he has the best in terms of physical attributes. When you take a look at all their players, I think he has the best. And then the third player, I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to go with Jordan Jones, a corner from Rhode Island. Rams to the Rams. I like what they wrote about him. I did get a chance to look at I could only find a couple of clips on him, but I did like what I see. He looked like a fluid player, but the 3 scouting reports used the same word, ball hawking corner. I like that. I like that term when you describe a player, and I like his physical attributes, his measurables. I'm going to go with Jordan Jones as a surprise. And I know I'm only supposed to name 3, but I got one player that's going to be, I think, might be a nice, pleasant surprise for us, and that's that inside linebacker from Incarnate Word, Aniel Lebecki. I like this kid. I really do. I like what they wrote about him. I love his intangibles. 6 feet, 240. I will say this. I was really excited about the possibility of the Rams signing Ivan Pace as a UDFA, but he got signed like almost immediately. He would have been a great fit next to Ernest Jones, but I think this kid, definitely keep an eye out for this kid. He might make that spot as a 2-down linebacker. He hustles. He works hard, very unselfish, and the kid likes to hit. So everything you need an inside linebacker right next to Ernest Jones.
Yeah, and he set the school record, 130 tackles last season,
right.
I think. And a note on Quentin Johnson, I'm probably going to get the numbers wrong, but I think most of these undrafted free agents get, $10,000, $15,000 signing bonuses, somewhere in that range. And Quentin Johnson, the Rams had him on the phone and offered him, I believe it was $50,000 to
Wow.
get him in camp. So they obviously wanted him real bad.
You know what his scouting report was? 2 words: tackling machine.
Oh, you're talking about the Incarnate Word guy, or
Quentin Johnson.
Quentin
That was
Johnson?
his scouting report. Tackling machine. That's how they.
But he's the same guy. Oh, it's Jason Taylor is the one that had to clean up his tackling. Quentin Johnson, not so much. Okay, gotcha.
That's
so
interesting.
let me.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is. It is. Let me run through position by position how I feel about the Rams real quickly, and then we'll discuss quarterback. I think we're set. Matthew Stafford backed up by Stetson Bennett. Ripien signed. I'm square with our quarterback situation. Running back, I feel really good about it, especially if if Tyon Evans makes the team, bumps Ronnie Rivers off the squad perhaps. Wide receiver, I would have liked to see them add a receiver earlier, and I know both of you disagreed with me. You guys were right on that call as far as the direction the Rams went. As long as Cooper Kupp stays healthy, I think we're fine at wide receiver. Tight end, we're going to learn a lot about the direction of this group after June 1st, if Tyler Higbee is retained or not. But I'm comfortable with our tight end situation with or without Tyler Higbee. We have a lot to learn about these guys, but it's kind of exciting. Offensive line, I feel like if Joseph Noteboom steps up and holds up, this could be a really good offensive line and very deep. No really concerns there. Of course, we're holding out that we're assuming that Steve Avila is as good as advertised. And if that's the case, I feel pretty good about our offensive line. Defensive line, a little bit undersized. We need Bobby Brown to step up and a couple of other guys. Laurel Murchison, Ernest Brown the fourth. Remember that guy?
Mhm.
Whatever happened to him? Marquise Copeland, Jonah Williams, some no names there, but kind of like our wide receiver group. If Cooper Kupp stays healthy, wide receivers are fine. If Aaron Donald stays healthy, may not be as good as last year, but there's some upside with our defensive line. We'll be okay. Uh, Edge rushers, hey, who knows? We have to roll with what we have. We've added three guys, and let's just cross our fingers. Could we add a veteran there? That's probably one position we could. There's some guys out there. Um, Linebacker, I never really give a lot of thought to linebacker, for better or worse. Ernest Jones is the man right now. There's a lot of times we only have one linebacker out there, right? So we have to hope some of these guys step up and can back him up at least. And then cornerback, we've talked about that. I'm still concerned. We should all still be concerned, and just hope the Rams know what they're doing at that position. I think they really neglected the cornerback situation, and that might be our weakest unit. And with the guys we added at safety, with the young guys we already had, I'm okay with our safety group. That, in a nutshell, is how I feel about each of these position groups. Special teams, I left out, and that's another group, kind of like the edge rushers. Hey, we just have to kick back and watch and see how they perform and hope for the best. So that was a lot to throw out there. You want to go on a roll, Tom? How you feel about this team? Where the holes are? Where we need to go moving forward? Any
Yeah.
free agent signings that we might look forward to?
Yeah, I'll just stick with the holes because I agree with you on the majority of it in terms of where we're solid. There's a lot of competition and a lot of the offensive line and things aren't locked in, but there's a lot of good players there. So the rooms that I'm most concerned with is cornerback first and foremost by far. It's not even close. They needed to draft some more guys. We got one guy small. He's another Jacoby Durant essentially. Both slot guys theoretically, and just potentially don't have the size to be on an island outside. Are we going to rely on Kendrick? Is he our guy? And we better be able to get a pass rush. Our edge room is one of the three. Also, I'm concerned with, so I'm not sure we're going to get the pass rush that we need to get to keep Darian Kendrick safe out there on the edge. On the cornerback, I mean, because, like we saw last year, if he's going to get beat with just on pure speed if the quarterback has too much time. So really concerned about the cornerback position. We basically have three guys that at this point that could, theoretically play, right? Durant, Kendrick, who's a question mark, and Tomlinson, who's a draft pick. So really concerned about that. I think they will add at some when they're, at the end of the day, they'll add a outside corner that can come back in. And I believe Troy Hill's still available, believe it or not. So they might just decide to bring him back. Well, after they have a look at some of these guys. Otherwise, really quickly, inside linebacker. I don't think your Ernest Jones is obviously the dot and back there on the defense. But I don't know if Hummel will probably get the shot. If Hummel or Roseboom can actually start, they do most of the time have two guys on the field at inside linebacker, and so they're going to need another one. And I don't feel like I don't know if either of those guys are ready. So that's a question mark where they might bring somebody in. That's a pretty easy one to fill with a free agent. And then the last one we talked about was edge, needing some help out there. A lot of youth with Hoyt and obviously we talked about Byron Young and Daniel Hardy. Really hasn't played. Keir Thomas looked okay. You draft Hampton, Mathis. It's going to be interesting to see.
So you got three units on defense you're most concerned about, essentially cornerback, edge, and inside linebacker, which makes perfect sense. Totally agree. How about you, Paul? What are you worried about at this point?
Well, my favorite position is running back, and I just want to shout out Izzy wound up with the New York Jets, the kid from Pitt that we talked about.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Work perfect in that. And Tom Charbonnet wound up with Seattle.
Yeah, I know. Can't believe it.
But Charbonnet went exactly as slotted. I think he went at 57. So it was really interesting. But so running back, I mean, I guess we got Akers. We're going to see what this kid Williams can do. Hopefully he can stay healthy. We have Evans, and hopefully the kid from Louisville makes the roster. So it's an unproven scenario there, but it is what it is at this point. So if you stick to the trend that the first-year players watch and learn, we're going to have a lot of depth. So that's why I said I think they're building the roster from the bottom up. And when the Rams and you look at that elite year that we had, that's what the roster looked like, right? The young players on the bottom. They brought in some key players to round out the skill positions. So if you start from the top, wide receiver, I'm extremely nervous about, right? Cooper Kupp's coming off an injury. Let's hope he's at full speed. Van Jefferson, I like the fact that he committed to the weight room last year, but he's also got to stay healthy, right? He's got to produce. Puka Nacua, I think, could contribute right away. Let's see if he gets reps. So, the Skoman, the Skoman proved that he deserves a little bit of playing time too. So still an unproven commodity at wide receiver. So I do have a little bit of agita there. I think tight end, I think Higbee has to go. I think they can save some money there. I like going with the youth movement at tight end. And it might convince McVay to call their numbers a little bit more. These players got some upside. Holy cow. Hopkins and now this kid Allen. Oh, wow. I love it. They're like basketball players in cleats. I love it. So
did you purposely omit Tutu Atwell when you discussed wide receivers?
Tutu Atwell, I think at some point, it's in the NFL, it's put up or shut up, right? And I really hope this kid can stay healthy and we can really see what he can do. Look, all these players deserve a chance, right? So look, he also committed to the weight room. He put on some weight. Let's see what can happen. He could bring some sizzle to the return game. At this point, every spot is open. Competition is a great thing in training camp, right? The cream rises to the top. And let's hope that Tutu can contribute. I think they're going to bring in another wide receiver. I think they're going to.
Do you think McCutcheon has a shot at participating?
I would love to see McCutcheon get some reps. Look at that size. That's the thing. You don't know what you have until you put it out on the field.
Right?
You gotta let the kids play. So if there's any upside to what's been going on with the house cleaning, is that the young kids are going to play. So let's see what we have.
And it's going to
in terms of the wide receivers. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
I was going to say, in terms of the wide receivers, I think when we talk about the way this roster's, looking for this year, we have to, obviously we have 1 year in front of us and you can't play this year, next year, but the way that they're clearly this year is to set up next year, 2024. And so when you look at the wide receiver room, Van Jefferson is the one guy who's going to be a free agent after this season. So, and obviously if Kupp's the one, then if you're the wide receiver coach or you're the offensive coordinator, or you're McVay, you're saying, okay, who's going to be our number 2 next year? And that's what they're looking for. So I think McCutcheon's going to get a lot of looks. And if they can't find a number 2 out of this group, then that's going to be something they really target next year, either through the draft or through a stud free agent. But that's the way I'm looking at the wide receiver room. So I think this is a big audition year. They're going to let McCutcheon play. We're going to see certainly Puka. We're going to see Austin Trammell in the slot. We're going to see a lot of guys and continue to see Skoranek and so forth. So, and then, let Jefferson go, let Jefferson play, but mix in other guys. And then if Jefferson plays well, then you get a nice comp pick for him if he signs in the, $10 million range next year or something like that.
Yeah. And this is what I was going to say is this is an opportunity for Sean McVay to really prove that he is a great coach, to take this team from 5-12 with this giant infusion of new players, young players, a high turnover on the coaching staff as well, a lot of young coaches, And I think he's excited about that. And it's a big challenge for him. And if he can't get this turned around, he's going to take a ding as far as his legacy as, boy wonder coach. So he's going to be highly motivated to get this thing turned around real quickly.
The Ty Hill example, I think, is really a perfect example for what's going to happen now moving forward. Look how they got Ty Hill. Talk about under the radar. What a great acquisition, right? Sort of like that Austin Corbett acquisition from Cleveland also. Sort of like under the radar, low cost. Let's see what we got for a year. Build up, provide some leadership, whatever it may be. So I think you're going to see those little types of supplemental acquisitions. Nothing to break the bank, but you can't roll into the season with a roster of only undrafted free agents. It's not going to work.
Right.
You need to have some contributions, particularly. So on offense, I think the O-line, I think we're going to be okay. I think we have a lot of depth now in the O-line. I think training camp's going to be that's a position where it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think in the future, Avila is going to be the center of the future, if not the guard of the future. Whether or not he plays right away, I don't know. I think he's going to get every chance to win that left guard position. Defense, I will say this: when it's all said and done, and Aaron Donald retires, and regardless of how many, what happens, I think when the Rams look back at this as an organization, they're going to kick themselves that how many years they went and didn't put a superstar next to Aaron Donald, because it would have probably translated to at least one additional Super Bowl, right? And once again, they're going into the season, and it's no surprise when we won the Super Bowl, who was playing next to him? Von Miller, right? So all the other pretenders to the throne that were on the weak side linebacker position, right? The 1 year when we had a legitimate dynamic superstar playing next to him, look how it turned out. And I think as an organization, when they look back at that, they had the best defensive player in the league, and how many years they went without supplementing him. And they're perilously close to doing it again. And as a Ram fan, and this is a Ram forum, I can say that publicly to the United States and beyond, all the Ramily, that is a trend that, they really have to look at that. And that's on them. That's on them as an organization.
There was a conversation I heard about between Les Snead, Sean McVay, and Aaron Donald. If I could paraphrase it for you, it was something like, I think they were sharing with Aaron Donald what their draft strategy was going to be, and he said, "Just draft people that care." And I think they did that, but like you say, not going to be any superstars on this defense line. Hey, Tom, you're the expert on this panel, anyways, as far as contracts and money goes. June 1st. Well, they're already going to have to. Well, let me ask you this: do they have enough money to sign all these rookies?
They don't. They have to. They have to either clear it through the June 1st with Higbee's the only one that they can really do that with, or that they can easily do some restructure and kick some money down the road with Cup or a few other guys. So it's one of their big four. But there's no real threat there. But though just for the way a lot of people think, oh, if you cut somebody after June 1st, you save all this money. It's kicking the can down the road. It's just a way for teams to kick the can down the road in terms of when they cut somebody, when they take that cap hit. And so they'll still take the cap hit next year with Higbee if they do it, or they might not even designate him on June 1st and just take it all this year. So we'll see.
So do you think, given that their only path to signing free agents, period, is through restructuring, really? And
those guys aren't going to be very expensive. I mean, we're not talking about anybody significant at all. We're talking about, some $1.5 million, $2 million free agents if they have to. I think they're going to try and roll with this group, but if there's a position that they are just have this massive void at in the cornerback or something like that, which is the one that I can see happening, or inside linebacker, these guys turn out to be Troy Reader incarnated or something like that, then they're just like, well, we don't have anybody on a roster. We got to bring somebody in that can play this position. Otherwise, the other 10 guys out there are being left exposed. So I think it's a last resort. There's always plenty of guys that can come in and play okay.
Right.
And that's what they're not going to try and create a difference maker. And they just don't have enough money. They don't have enough money to, and their whole strategy isn't really financially driven as much as it is, we want to leave roster spots open for playtime, open for all these youngsters to have
Right.
a chance to show what they can do.
So I guess
And
the
the flexibility to do the big bang theory next year.
Yeah,
right?
next year's. Yeah, and to your point, they're going to do a big bang. There's nobody on this roster, that's a big bang guy on the defensive line or on edge that are going to have any chance of being what you talked about, Paul, in terms of a real strong difference maker. And the only guys that we're losing out of this entire crew next year is about 17 guys or something like that, including or 16 guys if you don't count Matthew Jester on one defensive line or edge on the UDFA, which is actually pretty amazing that there's only one UDFA between those two positions. But anyway, of the 16 guys, we're only losing 2 next year, and it's like Copeland and Murchison or something like that, which aren't exact. So and the guys that are left aren't going to be those superstars. So that's clearly a position that they're going to really load up on with their sort of 80 million projected that they'll have in cap space next year.
So this year, if they were going to sign any free agents, it might be low cost, agreed, maybe a big defensive tackle, a cornerback, and an inside linebacker, just to supplement what they have.
Yeah, a 1 year guy, or cheap 1 year guy.
I give it 2 preseason games, and Robert Rochelle will be gone. 2 preseason games. I give it 2, and then reality will set in, and he will be gone.
Yeah, he's actually did contribute pretty well on special teams, so he's a strong special teams player. So I don't think he'll be gone. I just if he was in the rotation in any way, shape, or form of the conversation for cornerback, I agree. And then Sean Jolly, which is an interesting. Speaking of cornerbacks, they brought him in last year, and then they parked him. He was one of the players that was on the he was on the 53, but on the inactive list. Game day inactive list most times. Even when he was active, he didn't play on special teams. But for some reason, they parked him. And that Demoff has talked about this, parking guys. And McCutcheon was a park job last year. The prior year, it was who was the edge? Was it
Chris Garrett?
Yeah, Chris Garrett was a park job the prior year. So they have these guys that are park jobs, and it's weird that Jolly was. So they must think something of him. But hopefully he can play.
He did play well, though. He definitely brought a spark. He definitely played with moxie. There's no question about it.
Yeah, and he didn't play very much, but when he did, he looked okay.
Probably worth mentioning, given what we've been talking about, the 2 undrafted free agents. One's a pretty big cornerback, another McCutcheon, Cameron McCutcheon out of Western Carolina. And then there was another one here, the guy out of Arizona State, Tamarcus Davis, 5'11", 180.
Yeah.
McCutcheon I have at 6'2", 200. So maybe one of them have a shot at making this roster as well.
Maybe short, athletic, physical cornerbacks. Maybe it's not such a bad thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
I think the corner scenario trend where they're going to smaller corners has to be because a lot of the defenses want the ability to match up. So no matter where you are on the field, whether you got to jump down into the slot or go to that's the issue. A lot of teams are using that, putting their best receiver at the slot, right? And that's really what they're trying to exploit, is that the inability of the defense to have that third defensive back that can cover, right? And Troy Aikman used to say it all the time when he was an announcer. He said, offense is simple. Is my slot receiver better than your third defensive back? Troy Aikman used to say that all the time. And it makes a lot of sense. So I think that's where you're seeing a lot of these corners that can play the perimeter, but also jump down and play the slot. And you have safeties that are now being able to do that they can play safety, come into the box, and jump down and cover the corner, the slot receivers. So I think that's a trend. So I think you're definitely going to see that. And because the smaller corners are so plentiful, right? I think that's the reason you're seeing so many of them.
Hey, we lost Tom for the moment, anyways. Any final thoughts on this draft and where the Rams are going? I think we're kind of in agreement on most of this, and I think it's just going to be an exciting time. It's just going to be a really interesting training camp and preseason, and can't wait to see it get started. It's going to be a different year, though. It's going to be maybe a slightly painful at times. Probably not as painful as last year, I'm hoping, no. But can't wait to see it get started.
I think it's exciting. Listen, look, as a Ram fan, I would love to be able to say, we're going in, we're locked and loaded. But, Tom will agree with me. Sometimes you got to take a step back to go forward, right? And that's okay, as long as you do it in a reasonable fashion, a well thought out fashion. So I think your point is spot on. I think it's going to be exciting. Let's watch the training camp battles. Let's see how it pans out, and let's watch the team. That's what they're going to be doing. Who gets released? Like I said, the Ty Hill is a perfect example. Austin Corbett in the past was a perfect example. And then they're going to supplement when they need to down the road. They're going to bring in those players that fit the system and when they need to make their run. So,
any final thoughts, Tom?
Yeah, no, I just it's exciting because we've sort of alluded to that it's a tryout year. It's just really open it up, let these young guys. We haven't seen that from the Rams. It's been this very as part of Paul mentioned, get the rookies and let them sit a year or two, cut their teeth on special teams and develop, and behind these players that are more experienced or veterans and so forth, because they really it's really been in make a run in the Super Bowl window the last 6 seasons, and so, or 5 seasons, we'll say. And so it's just exciting to see all these guys. We're going to see these guys play. Like if this was a draft class, how many of these guys would actually get a chance to compete with all of those guys on the roster? They cut 13 guys that were free agents. They didn't bring them back. They didn't cut them. And then they cut a bunch of others. So it's, to me, that's what's exciting, is we're going to see virtually all of these guys have a chance to play. And I do have a prediction. I think that our if you include Higbee being the 5th, but if you include, sort of Stafford and Donald and Kupp and Havenstein, I do think those guys are going to sit some this year and let some of the other guys play in their place. It's not going to be, load management like the NBA, but it's going to be, nagging injury. He's questionable. Oh, he's going to sit out, And I mean, because the number one goal is none of those guys can get hurt. Like, there's no chance we're winning the Super Bowl this year. This team clearly plays for Super Bowls. So those guys cannot get hurt, number one. And number two, we know they're great players. So rest them up for when we make our run in 2024 and whatever that means and looks like. And let some of these other guys play. Let's see Stetson Bennett play some real games at quarterback. We are going to see it, almost guaranteed. And it's not because Matthew Stafford gets, killed like he did last year. It's because he's going to have a nagging injury and he's going to sit out. And we're going to see Stetson Bennett lead this offense. I can't wait.
Yeah, it may be dependent on the schedule. If the schedule comes out such that, the Rams can get out of the gate 3-1, maybe their strategy would change, but we'll have to see.
All right, Mark and Tom, outside of the Rams, who are your teams that ace the draft?
I haven't looked at it that closely. I thought the Lions, I didn't really like their top end of the draft. I just thought position-wise it was a little bit odd. I have to like the Seahawks draft, although I think people are are overreacting to how much impact that can have on a team year one. Those are probably my only comments. I thought it was kind of odd, Green Bay taking 2 tight ends, I think, in their first 3 rounds. But hey, I've been on vacation. I haven't really looked at a lot of the other teams' drafts yet. How about you, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I did not. I got some nice, fun, friendly debates with. Well, the Lions fans are very defensive about their draft, um, and I don't think that they have. I don't like their positional value at all. Like if you're gonna do it, and this is the right draft to do it in. But that's an entire sort of debate in and of itself. Taking linebackers and these kinds of things.
I'm gonna go with. I know I'm biased because I think Tomlin's the greatest. Tomlinson's the greatest, right? Mike Tomlin, I think, is the greatest. So I'm gonna go with the Steelers. I love what the Steelers did. Broderick Jones, Joey Porter, Keanu Benton, Darnell Washington, Nick Herbig, Corey Trice, Spencer Anderson. I just thought they got great value in every round. And enough sizzle to go along with the lunch bucket guys. So I like what they did. I like what the Steelers did, and I like what Philly did. Philly, once again, you got to love what they do. They did a great job. They got Jalen Carter. They got your guy, Mark Nolan Smith, Tyler Steen, Sidney Brown, Kelly Rengo, Tanner McKee, and Moro Jomo. So
didn't they draft the Georgia defense? Is that what I heard?
Jalen Carter, yeah. Listen, the SEC is where it's at. You got to bring in the SEC players.
Right. Right.
So
I saw the going off on a tangent here. So one of the guys posted their top 15 college football teams for next year, and there was surprisingly a shortage of SEC teams in the top 10 or so. And I think there were 4 Pac-12 teams, including Washington. I think he had it number 4.
Wow.
Real interesting, but it's early for that, though. Hey, guys, I think we've got enough here. Gone over almost an hour and a half. Good stuff. I really appreciate your time. We'll talk again. Maybe we'll get together in mid-June when things have fermented even more. We'll have a little bit more to talk about. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. And let's do it again real soon. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
All right. Go Rams.
Bye-bye.